We're going to be diving into the Freemasons. So let's get started. Here we see corporate structure that they have. There's 33 rights to their thing. And there's different rights that I'm not too familiar with. I'll have to get back on the part 2 for this, because they have a very interesting Turkish, Solomon, various esoteric traditions that are very interesting. But as far as the nuances, I haven't got too much into in terms of research, but I do like to stick to the fundamental principle objectives and dogmas they believe. So it is believed that their origin is from the Middle Ages, from the 11th century onward, something like that. And that's very possible because there was a lot of labor guilds, labor unions, trade guilds at that time of construction workers or masons wanting to get a higher wage for their skill or trade. So it's very possible, but I don't think there's too much documentation of it. Here we see Pythagoras, who was a geometrist. He is very crucial in their dogma or ethos because he was one of the first people to be very geometric in observing the numerological phenomena we see in this realm. And obviously in this picture we see that duality thing that they love to uphold, left hand path versus right hand path, and the perversity that is believing in both at the same time. And I think that is why we see so much in their iconography, and we'll see later on in this presentation a few slides down. I think their reverence of just having it all over their material and their iconography is in and of itself is perversive of right hand path stuff, of being obedient to authority and being repressed by your religious conviction. But nevertheless, they also uphold Solomon, all credit to Nick Fuentes. He was a conjurer of demons, and he was the first trade person, international trader or center. He communed with all the demons of the Middle East at the time to facilitate trade with all these various tribes, and became very wealthy and eventually defied God with his ignorance and disobedience. And that story is very important to the Freemasons because not only did he build the temple, which is what they call their quasi churches and where they meet, but also the dualistic belief in believing in demons while also trying to worship or seemingly worship a god. So Solomon is very prominent in their rituals, I'd venture to believe. Here we see a European king. I believe their premier objective in previous centuries was to depose all monarchies, which is why we'll see them in the coming revolutions I'll speak about. But yeah, the reason they're so not prominent in modern days is because they got rid of monarchies. They've effectively won. There's a few monarchies like in Luxembourg or Liechtenstein or whatever. And in Asia, there's probably a few, but they're not really around. Monarchy is a very outdated belief of governmental ruling. Here we see the founding fathers, or some of them. A lot of them were Freemasons. I'd venture to say all of them were, though it is believed that some of them were more Christian than others because they knew the commoners were Christian and were very strong in their conviction. So they had to find, this is more speculative, but they had to find a middle ground where they expressed that there can be freedom of religion, but at the same time wanted to keep that liberal order open. And that's why we see them in the foundation of this liberal democratic republic that we live in, or I live in. Some of you might not, some of you viewers, but it is a very strong vanguard of Freemasonic dogma that we still see to this day. Here we see the siege of Bastille. The French Revolution was a bunch of conflicts that was mostly Freemasonic in nature because they were, I believe, fine tuning their esoteric political practices as well as seeing how effective media was. And there was various speculations that Robespierre and the Jacobins and all these cats that were Age of Enlightenment pundits were Freemasonic in their intentions, and it's hard to pinpoint whether that's true or not. But they were very prominent, and credit to Historia Ecclesiastica, he said they were the foot soldiers of the not just the Enlightenment but of the French Revolution, and it showed that they really could make a change in terms of defeating the royalists or the monarchists and deposing kings. Here we see the USSR at its apogee when they had the most republics, and I do believe this is very speculative that Freemasons were at the root of communism in terms of its financing, with Kuhn and Loeb, Jacob Schiff, Max Warburg financing Trotsky and Lenin to go to New York and have them train and kind of plan what they were going to do to Tsar Nicholas's reign and how they were going to use this new ideology by the Freemason, Karl Marx. And whether Engels and others were Freemasons, I'm not sure, but I do think Karl Marx was a Mason, and they understood that communism was going to be a vehicle for their Freemasonic agenda. Here we see a picture of some classic Cold War hawks, Lyndon B. Johnson, very puppeted president with Kissinger. And I do think there's some traces that I could find of this dialectic of, oh, we have to stop communism, and it was really upholding the military industrial complex as a Freemasonic tool for not just the expenditure of money itself, but the financing of war. It was very lucrative for Freemasonic goals, I believe. And that's more speculative, probably even more than the communist thing. And one of the reasons I made this video is because I'm going to reveal something very controversial. But here we see a Freemasonic NASA guy, and I do believe a lot of the supposed moon landers, in terms of Buzz Aldrin and the other ones, Lance Armstrong or whatever, they were Freemasons, and a lot of, here we go, flat earthers go up to them and say, what's it all about that we haven't been back to the moon? Why is that the case? And they'll say some retarded answer like, we don't have the technology or whatever. And it just doesn't really add up. And I think there's like definitely a weird thing going on there. And I'll quickly talk about the mid 2000s, new age phenomena that really inspired me in some sense. Here we see Carl Sagan, this retard, thought that the world or the cosmos was ever expansive and all this nonsense. And Zeitgeist was something that inspires me to this day. Peter Joseph, inspired by Carl Sagan, and George Carlin and other controversial types, or I guess atheist types, that propagated, this new age ideology where God is just like that. Sky Daddy belief is so ridiculous. Come on, guys, let's believe in the cosmos and stuff. And Zeitgeist really inspired me in the 2010s, but I think it was, to this day, but I think it definitely was controlled opposition. And I think it has a very Freemasonic tendency in that sense, that inverting the belief in Jesus Christ. And I guess this would be a perfect segue to exposit what I think the Freemasons are in terms of the story of Genesis. I believe the Freemasons, they believe Lucifer was the real messenger of the real God, was to liberate man from the repressed reality of the fake God, the Abrahamic God. So I say all that to say that in this era, we saw a lot of this atheistic belief, this science as a religion belief that was propagated in the mainstream media at the time. And they definitely controlled the opposition by putting Zeitgeist on Netflix. Or I didn't see it at its premiere. I saw it like in 2011, 2010. And this whole seemingly grassroots phenomena of people waking up to the ludicrous idea of religion. And it's funny, they always criticize Christianity, but not the other ones. Here we see some iconography of the Masons, the all seeing eye. And when people say, the Illuminati, it's always like a euphemism, really. They're really trying to say like Freemasons, or you could say world Jewry, because there is a lot of overlap there. And well, I'll probably get into it in part two, but I think their reverence in all their the fact that there's always a duality in all the iconography, I think in that sense that in and of itself is a worship of the inversion of picking one path. Because if you're with God, you're gonna actually pick a path and stick to it, and I think that's just a weird phenomena. We see that they always, in every picture they have to have a checkerboard, a Solomon duality binary thing. They can't just stick to one. And I think it's very, akin to worshiping a demon while also worshiping your good God at the same time. And here we see a flat earth model. So I've decided I'm going to believe in the flat earth for the time being until I see better evidence of otherwise. I do think Freemasons have kind of controlled the opposition of seemingly, I've been watching a lot of Eric Dubay, which I got to his content from Zerka. And I do think Freemasons, because they've propagated Zeitgeist and Carl Sagan and all that stuff, all these controlled ops, they've made the theory of flat earth seem so retarded, and they put it in schools and stuff to make it crazy to believe in flat earth, right? And there's definitely a controlled op aspect in that whole gamut. So that's kind of my quick theory on that. And what Freemasons are today, they're not, I mean, they pretty much won in the fallen world we live in. There's not, as I said, there's not many monarchies around. That ruling style is completely gone. It's touched upon in certain places, but it's really not gone. We live in a liberal, open democracy, as well as a republic. This theory of, everywhere you hear it in media, even in international media or news, you'll hear, democracy, liberty, all the credos of the French Revolution are always propagated everywhere. And it's obviously we believe in democracy and freedom and all that shit. So it's really left hand path shit, and it's just gay. I don't believe in it. So it's kind of a quick rundown on this whole stuff and why I'm a flat earther now. So it's pretty out there, but I do think the Freemasons have made it seem like you're a flat earther. Are you retarded? So there's that. And I guess my last slide here is where there's probably even more out there where this will end up at. And here we see the Pope of Freemasonry talking about the World War III being, Zionist Illuminati versus the Islamic world. And it's kind of reigns true right now. Palestine's freaking, it's like scorched earth, and the Zionists are murdering. It's like crazy. And, we're coming up on the 80 years of Israel having to be either completely destroyed or becoming, the new Solomon, the Neo Solomon temple and shit. And the Moshiach comes back and all that stuff. So, I guess I don't really have a fully fledged out theory on what's going to happen, but here we see, possible World War III scenario, the apocalyptic, which kind of sounds cool in a lore way, but, we'll see where that goes.